At this point, I'd like to thank Retech for creating the content for this presentation. Helping customers reach their goals is the primary focus of Retech Life Sciences. They enable innovators to accomplish more by helping them understand the nuances of regulatory requirements, creating product data management strategies, and meet compliance deadlines in a timely manner. Retech measures success by exceeding expectations with superior customer service and results. They serve manufacturers and distributors of medical device and drug products, and for those who support them in consulting and IT roles by delivering better outcomes for the collection, transformation, submission, and analysis of regulatory data. Their solutions support the innovation ecosystem and enable you to achieve regulatory compliance and improved product data management, contributing to impactful innovations to our world. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to your speakers for today's event. Our first speaker is Gary Sainer, Senior Manager, Information Solutions Life Sciences with Retech. Gary is a subject matter expert, SME, on medical device unique device identification, UDI, and other structured content reporting to regulatory agencies and commercial organizations. He has over 30 years of experience in the areas of software development, process management, and data administration, with the last 15 years focused on the life sciences industry. With an understanding of regulations, business requirements, and systems, he has helped shape and implement solutions at Retech for data management, validation, and processing of drug labeling and medical device UDI content. He serves as a co-chair of the industry's structured product labeling technical team and on the advisory board of the Medical Devices Group. Our second speaker is John Lorenc, Senior Manager, Regulatory Solutions with Retech. John directs electronic submission and regulatory requirement initiatives that impact both the medical device and pharmaceutical industries. He has advanced experience with electronic drug product labeling and listing requirements and global UDI submissions. He participated as an industry resource in the original FDA pilot in 2012 and is currently focused on the present-day requirements for EU, UDI, and South Korea and China. He represents Retech in membership with MedTech Europe. And now it is my pleasure to pass over the controls to our first speaker, and that is Gary. So Gary, when you are ready, you may begin.
Well, thank you, Sonia, for that introduction. I think I have the title slide up here, and we can get right into the presentation. We have a lot to cover. We have the topic of medical device UDI submissions to China, and this is a lot of good information that John and I have prepared. Would be glad to share it with you. So the various discussion topics that we'd like to go through is, first of all, take a look at the global timing and get the context of the China requirements, and take a look at how they fit into the many other things that are on your desk at this point in time. UDI desk is actually getting pretty crowded right now, and we see in the next couple of years it's not going to get any better. So it's going to be really full with a lot of various regional areas coming on board. But anyway, we'll take a look and see how China fits in, and then spend most of the time diving into some of the details about the China NMPA UDI requirements, take a short look at some of the other regional requirements, and show a little bit of an overview of the Retech solution that would help you address some of these upcoming UDI challenges. With all that said, let's take a quick high look at things that have occurred in the past. So those that have been around with UDI for a number of years know that US is pretty well near the end of their multi-phase program of implementing UDI. Class 3s, 2s are have passed, and those compliance dates have already occurred. We'll take a look at the Class 1s in the coming slide here. Then on the National Health Service of England front, that particular organization is a buyer of medical devices. So this is not a regulatory entity, but a buyer, a consumer. They have put some requirements in place for UDI, and they have occurred over 2017 through 2019. And then near the end of last year, South Korea started their implementation of UDI with their Class 4 products with some manual entries. And then just the turn of the year, if you do sell products, implants into Netherlands, you should be aware that you need to report some information to the National Implant Registry. Now, let's take a look in the future. What's coming up? So one of the things that is probably well known at this point, the US FDA has extended for 2 years their deadline for the Class 1 products. Still a lot of work to be done. We highly encourage people to get that underway because it's a firm platform and a firm set of requirements. And you'll see how things get crowded in the 21 and 22 timeframe. So it's good to get that US FDA Class 1 off the desk here. Now, in the European arena, the UDI has been delayed a certain period of time, 2 years out to 2022, but there's some early voluntary submissions that are able to be done for UDI. And the date of application for the medical devices 2021 and 2022 for the in vitro diagnostics. We do understand voluntary submissions are able to be done for UDI come May of 2021. So that's just a few months away. Quick comment on the National Health Service of England. That in vitro diagnostic list would then need to be required across all classes in 2021. And now, South Korea, there's a continuing phased implementation for the South Korea UDI. So there's this Class 3 in 2020, Class 2, 2021, and the Class 1s in 2022. For today, we're going to focus in on China. So the first entry on this timeline is in regard to their first batch of medical devices. We'll go into some of the details of what that includes and what the requirements are. And then there's some additional timing. Roughly, we expect 2 years that needs to be confirmed, but 2 years for the next Class 3, and we'll look at ongoing timing after that. Now, hiding in the background are a number of other agencies. Various countries out there have discussed UDI. Saudi Arabia is literally right around the corner, and we actually expected a few weeks ago to announce a program for UDI. So when you look at this particular roadmap, it's really getting crowded, a lot of deadlines. If you're a global manufacturer and supply to many different regions, it gets to be quite complex. Before we go on, Sonia, are we able to do a quick poll question and find out where the audience is in their commercial distribution around the world?
Yes, we can, Gary, and I will launch that poll question right now. Okay, audience members, this poll question is done in real time, so your participation is greatly appreciated. I'll give you about 40 seconds to complete this poll question, and once we've got everyone to cast their polls, cast their selection, I will share the results with you. So the question we have for you today is, in what countries do you market your medical devices? So please go ahead and check all that apply. We have USA, EU, China, Saudi Arabia, and South Korea. So please go ahead and cast your vote, and then I will close the polls and share the results. Okay, and it looks like we have the majority of our members have cast their votes. I'll leave another 10 seconds for those of you who are now doing so. So please go ahead and make your selection, and then I will share the results with you. Okay, it looks like we have everyone has voted, so thank you very much for that. Now I'm going to close the polls and share the results. Okay, so here are the results of our first poll question. And the question is, in what countries do you market your medical devices? We have 96% that said USA, 93% that said EU, 83% said China, 73% said Saudi Arabia, and 69% said South Korea. So thank you everyone for participating in that last poll. Now I'm going to pass over the controls back to Gary. So Gary, it's all yours.
All right, thanks, Anya. Let's move ahead. Thank you for participating in that poll. Let's get into some of the details on the China UDI activity. Going back a number of years, there's actually some history before this, but I highlighted starting in 2019, July timeframe here, there was an announcement from the National Medical Products Administration, NMPA, that a UDI pilot would be launched and used to flesh out some of their database, their procedures, their policy, and so on. They did release draft guidances at that point in time. There was a data set and a guide. A little bit later in that year, August, there were rules and another document, interpretation guide, both very valuable in understanding the concept of their UDI program. And then in October of last year, there was an announcement that came out regarding the first batch. This was a subset of class 3 medical devices. So it includes 64 product categories. We'll take a look at those. And this announcement set up the timing, some of the milestones that would need to be included and met, and a list of those actual products. The policy is actually somewhat similar to the USA, and if you did a comparison, it's maybe a little bit closer to the FDA rather than the European Union implementation. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. But there's various standards about applying UDI to the actual label, product label, and the package label. Various rules that need to be observed. Database for collecting the information, and so on. Throughout the pilot, mid last year and flowing into this year, there's a number of events that took place there. Most notably in December is actually when the database was launched, and looks like it's now nearing completion. So what is more important for this particular audience is the October 1st deadline of 2020. So this particular deadline would apply for those products that fall into this first batch, and then would need to have UDI on the product. The registration would need to be in place, and the UDI would need to be reported to that database. This schedule shows a 2-year time frame for the other classes, the balance of the class 3 devices, class 2 and class 1s, all 2 years in succession thereafter. That may actually change. We're waiting for confirmation of what that original schedule will look like. I think it's probably going to be adjusted based on how well this first batch goes, but we'll certainly keep you informed as to any changes into the schedule. Now, if I was a manufacturer, I'd like to know, well, hey, am I in the first batch or not, right? So let's take a look at some of these slides. We'll leave this for your homework, but if you find that you have an implant, high-risk implant, class 3, and see any of your products on the next couple slides here, I'll just kind of walk through them. It would behoove you to start to buckle down and research the activities here if you haven't already. And I know many of you are very knowledgeable in this and actually participated in the pilot through the end of last year and into the first half of this year. But these implants are cover a lot of active and passive implants, actually, as we see here. And many of these items would be high risk, and I think that is what the NMPA is focusing in on. Now, if you are in that particular group, then you obviously want to learn a little bit more about the policy, how UDI is being implemented, and what a particular approach they're pursuing. Here's a side-by-side comparison, assuming, and it looked like most of the audience does market in the US, so you probably have a little bit of a framework, a precedent, and can compare how China is implementing UDI as opposed to what they needed to do for US. Starting off with that approach, pretty much the same as I had mentioned earlier. Product and packaging labels, they're phasing it by risk, which is a little bit different than how the European Union approached this implementation. Again, starting off with that first batch. The documentation, I personally found the US very comprehensive and timely, allowing enough time to react to it. There is the issue of language translation, and those that are outside China or don't speak Chinese, understand Chinese, then translation needs to be done. And sometimes that it gets to be a little bit of a problem. And John, I'm going to ask you to jump in here. How you work through a lot of these specifications in setting up our program. Did that turn out to be a problem, or were you able to translate and get all the details that you needed, or what's the experience that we've had?
Yeah, it's been interesting for sure. One of the main sources is the NMPA UDI site itself, where they post information with the data dictionary, from our focus, the machine-to-machine specifications, and you really just kind of have to hawk that area and just on a daily basis to see if there's any updates posted. The communication's not great when there will be updates and version history and so forth. But for the most part, they translate well. For some more of the policy documents, everything's being published in Chinese, so it has to be translated to your language of choice, in this case English. And be careful with it, obviously, because the translation will be important on the the advising on the information.
Yep. The other thing I'll highlight here is the next row of the exceptions. If those that were familiar with the FDA final rule, remember there was a whole section that delineated various exceptions for inventory and other types of scenarios. I have not seen that level of detail from China. Maybe that'll come out as the result of this first batch, but that is something that struck me as being a little bit different. And now issuing agencies. So those in the US and those connected with the EU are familiar with GS1, HIBIC, and ICC BBA as being 3 approved issuing agencies. This is a little bit different over in China. So GS1 is recognized, and an issuing agency does have to have a presence, address and office inside China. But I believe from what I've been able to do a little bit of research that there's a ZIIOT. I'm not sure if it's nicknamed Zayat, but ZIIOT and Ally Health, and the last one I'm not going to try to go through and pronunciate that one. But those 3 additional agencies look like they would be recognized, and potentially more. So it's interesting to see that particular difference when you compare that back to the FDA. Now, the presentation of the UDI and the label, pretty much the same. There has to be a human readable text portion, and then what is referred to as the AIDC, the automatic data information capture. Typically, it's a 1-dimensional or 2-dimensional barcode, and that is the same with the China implementation. Some more comparisons here. And John, I'm going to ask you to jump in here. From day one, the FDA had a pre-production and production environment and did support vendors extremely well. We were, as a vendor, able to set up a pre-production account and have some information tested. Very helpful in setting that up, not only for us, but also for manufacturers to work in a pre-production environment. But that was only recently launched in China. And John, what was the impact of that not being able to play and do some tests. And then it looks like there's also this need for a vendor to be associated with a manufacturer as a sponsor.
Correct. So as you have identified here, prior to July, there was only the production environment, which the NMPA had for UDI, and that environment is what was used for the pilot. So although manufacturers may have been in an early pilot, they're actually entering data into the production environment. So, and that was all that was available. That's all we're aware was going to be available. So when we started working on our systems and looking to connect from a machine-to-machine perspective, our initial setup actually happened in production. And to your point, needed the just a vendor having an account. Just a vendor account alone is not something that was supported. In the US, we could do that. So, RETEC actually has a good ID account in the pre-production environment for US FDA, but China, at least at the moment, wasn't supporting something like that. So it needed to be in unison with a manufacturer. So that was challenging to want to build and test out a connection to a database in production. So luckily, when the test environment became available in July, that gives, again, the manufacturer a test environment, but then we're able to, more comfortably utilize a connection such as that to, guide the development and testing of that connection. So that was definitely a unique piece. And little teaser to South Korea, we see the same thing, where in South Korea, it's still just a production environment. There's no available test instance.
Yeah. Okay, very good. As to the data attributes, they're roughly the same number, but noteworthy here is that the data is recorded in what I refer to as a linear record. There's not a hierarchy. So those that have been working with, excuse me, the European Union, they're aware of a buddy, a basic UDI-DI hierarchy, which is a grouping of a model level, and then one or more devices are inside that group. And so there is a hierarchy, two records and need to be linked together. There's none of that in the US or the China NMPA implementation.
Right, and Gary, I would like to add, and kind of in reference to the earlier slide prior to this, we said, with the documentation and some of it could be ambiguous. We did notice currently a potential discrepancy in the data attributes with a newly released document, which we have the translation for, which essentially lists out, it's the first reporting guide for UDI database information, and as well as the data attribute identification. So within those documents, we're now seeing 42 attributes. So we're in the process of addressing that discrepancy to see what's ultimately the source of truth there. So it may be a little bit less even with the UDI data attributes, but again, still to your point, it is that linear record. It's all kind of like a device-based submission.
Yep, very good. And it's rare that the count usually goes up, but it's rare that it goes down in this particular case. But we'll see after this phase one, this basic or the first batch, whether or not any records are added or deleted. Sometimes they're redefined, and as time marches on, more records or more data fields get added to the record is typically what I have seen in the past, but we'll see.
Yep.
Now, the submission method is, again, a little bit different. Both are able to support manual entry. There is the ability to log into the NMPA website and upload a spreadsheet, but the automatic transmission of data is quite different. So in the FDA, there's this electronic submission gateway used for many different submission of files to the FDA. But in this particular case, there's a particular SPL, structured product labeling, XML file that's defined. But now there's a API that is used for China submissions, and it has its own XML proprietary definition of information, getting data to flow into that. So that's a little bit different. John, any quick comments on the API? That's the route, obviously, that we've taken for high volume and electronic submissions.
Yes, yeah, that's what we've been working on and building out against. Similar to the US FDA, there is a authorization and so forth that has to be established in association between if there's third-party vendor submitting on behalf of the manufacturer. But at least the skipping the step with needing to have like an AS2, AS4 protocol that you would need for US or Europe with the ability to leverage an API.
Yep. So the other two the other two rows down here have to do with the actual submission fields and the review. Those that are familiar with the US are aware of the current 7-day grace period where you can make updates. Policy is a little bit different in China, where you draft a particular record and publish it, goes through some workflow, and then it looks at a publish date out in the future before it actually is published to the database. And then the locked fields are a little bit different. Again, the concept is still there, but different identifiers are locked. And then the other fields that are unlocked would need to go through an NMPA review for an update. Anything you want to add to that, John, on those particular topics?
Yeah, just with the UDI submission review, what's interesting is with the US FDA, they also have this draft status of a record, but that's only relevant to the user interface entry of data into Good ID. So if anyone's familiar with having an FDA Good ID account, and if you've in the past directly, through manual data entry, entered data in the Good ID, you can see you could save record as a draft before really kind of committing it to be published. It's that same step. However, what's interesting is with machine to machine with the API, we also have to go through that step. So you initially submit that draft and then send another API call to commit it to publication. But once that hits, it has that same DI publish date workflow. So you can control the publish date, make the changes you need to make prior to that hitting. But now, very differently with the UDI data lock fields, there's only roughly 5 fields that lock. You could update the other fields, but then it triggers this NMPA review, which may be manual at this point, looking at the data that's being changed through the updated submission to the published record, and the NMPA is determining, are these changes allowed to be made. So that's definitely unique and different from the FDA failing the validation of a submission. If you're trying to change a field that shouldn't be changed, is a little bit more open with some manual review. So we're very interested to see how that plays out as as this evolves.
All right, very good. Let's turn our attention over to the actual list of the attributes connected with the device. So here's some grouping of the 51 total, and again, this appears to be cut down to the low 40s, but categories relative to the identification of the product would include that primary device, the version name, the brand name, and so on. There's some fields that would identify the registrant. There's fields that are regulatory related, safety related, packaging related, characteristics regarding the product, and some questions about the production control. So if you notice, there's perhaps subtle here, but there's some of the entries are in black, and that would indicate that they're similar to the US. And actually, there's a lot of them, 36 in this particular list. They're similar to the US. I'm not saying they're exactly identical, but the concept is very close to what the US has. And then 15 are unique to China, and those have the blue text. So you can see a lot of similarity with the FDA. If we compared this list to the EU, you'd see a lot of different attributes. The main ones that strike my attention are those in the regulatory area. Certainly those in the FDA arena have seen the FDA product codes and the listing numbers and other type of marketing application numbers and that so on. But obviously all that is replaced by Chinese identifiers and a lot of information about the actual product itself. So that's the list of characteristics. You can take a look at that in more detail at your leisure. We get asked numerous times about the overall steps to implement. Where do I start? What do I do here with a particular implementation? And these particular 5 steps are very general, universal. I've used these 5 steps not only for the FDA and EU, but now for China. Obviously, there's some regional things that come into play, but across the top, the main headers, the main milestones would be to set up your internal process and prepare that. Second step there is to concentrate on your data. Third is to have a data management system and submission capability to report that information. Fourth, it has a number of steps regarding the labeling system. And the 5th is the ongoing operation. So some of the details, if we go back to the first step, we're not going to hit all of these, but a couple I want to highlight would be in the process preparation, create your governance team. Now, what might come into play here are different time zones. Your team is across multiple time zones. There is this need to have a presence in China. So whether you have an affiliate inside your corporate umbrella, or you have a China agent or that is involved in your logistics and needs to be involved in this team, you need to have that into your particular team and accommodate that. So when you identify the UDI requirements, obviously now you're looking at, first of all, do I have any products that fall into that first batch, and therefore the whole sense of urgency needs to increase. If you don't, then then there's a little bit of additional planning can be added and put into the the overall schedule, and then find out where you are and start making collections of data in the second step there, and creating a particular method and approach of reporting data to the database. Are you going to do some manual? Are you going to do electronic? Are you going to use APIs? Are you going to work with a vendor? Are you going to try to build something yourself? A lot of different approaches there. We're glad to talk to you about some of the advantages and disadvantages of those methods. And then labeling, don't forget this. A lot of people just kind of jump right to this one as the only impact, but there's many impacts of UDI. In some cases, you'll have to redesign your labels, get that UDI in that label, and make sure that you use a identifier that's approved. So you might have been using a non-approved identifier or something that's proprietary, and that is a pretty big step to re-identify and map your whole product inventory over to a new, a recognized standard. And don't forget to verify those barcodes to make sure the print quality is recognized by the grade C or above, that sort of thing, where you're able to ensure that your downstream users through that logistic chain has a high quality barcode to read and make use of that automation, make sure there's no errors, and that it doesn't get distorted over the course of the delivery of that particular product. And then the last step there, just a couple points to highlight is go ahead and roll your production. There are requirements to maintain data and have the data updated if it changes. And then obviously, if you bring out a new version, you'll need to introduce that through this UDI environment in any new products. So they, again, would be candidates for UDI identification. So a couple things I'd like to go over now, more of a discussion type of interview with John. We have seen industry aware, certainly the big global players are aware of China. And John, let me ask the question, have you come across some of, or do you believe there are some small and mid-sized companies out there that are perhaps not aware of the details of UDI, or else they're pushing it off into the back room and say, well, I haven't been forced to do it yet. I don't need to act on it. I know there's actually some U.S. companies that market in the U.S. region that are actually having that attitude, is like, well, no one has enforced anything on me yet, and I haven't had my wrist slapped, so I'm not going to participate. So first of all, the awareness, what do you think the industry awareness is? What level do we have here of the China requirements for UDI?
Mm-hmm. I feel like it's mixed. I think GS1 Global does a good job, and working with GS1 China in pushing information out. So assuming if your organization participates in groups such as that, there would be some awareness. But we have spoken to some manufacturers that it did actually catch them from surprise, because it was a little bit ambiguous as to what was happening. They'd see the words pilot a lot, and just weren't sure as to what ultimately was going to be required. It was, the deadline originally shifting, that just, gives some doubt as to what will be expected. And it was pretty also ambiguous as to who was going to be impacted. So now in these slides, and I believe they've published the different product types that are in that first batch, gives a better sense of that. But what's remaining after that is also still up in the air as into when others will be impacted. So yeah. I don't say there's great awareness, but there's definitely awareness and activities going on. What does it exactly mean has been a challenge.
And then the next point about the actual progress, I was aware of one delay from August to October. You could attribute that to perhaps COVID-19 activities, but for the most part, I believe they're pretty much on time. What's your quick feel, John, for meeting the October deadline? Do you think they'll be ready and supporting that?
Yeah, it certainly all looks like that's going to be on time. We see it with, just the, updates the NMPA has been pushing out with the guidelines and so forth. It does appear like perhaps there might be some, additional tweaking along the way until you get up to potentially October, but no indications that this is going to move any further, specifically for this first batch.
Yeah, and then once you get involved in the details of connecting the database, there's this requirement to have an account registration, get that approved, become familiar with the user interface. So there's some training that goes on there in walking through the data submission, review, and publication, and so on. So I think there's some time that those in the audience would need to set aside for that. Do you see any challenges, major challenges, and have you seen good support from NMPA for the help desk and questions that we might have?
Yes, For the most part, the NMPA help desk has been very responsive. You know, hint, you do have to ask the support questions in Chinese. They do ask for that if you attempt to send them a question via English. However, they have been supportive both on, you know, more of the guiding side for manufacturers for setup, in addition to you know, the more technical side with the interface for the API. So, and there's times where it may be something new that they haven't thought, you know, previously considered or planned for, such as, you know, the testing environment. But, you know, that was a consistent request and piece of feedback, you know, earlier in the year. So, you know, it was a good sign seeing how they responded to that favorably pretty quickly. Also, you know, with that release in July.
Yeah, very good. So I'm going to jump to the next slide here, and can you summarize some of the support progress that we and the developments that we have in-house here, and maybe any testing insights? I know there's been a lot of activity and development, and we've made some data submissions and so on. Just anything that you want to recap?
Yeah. So we've been working through, you know, as RETEC, we have, you know, global UDI submission support. So expanding our single source product line to include the attribution, business rules, and API connection for the NMPA is a lot of the work that we've been doing this year. As mentioned earlier, there was a bit of a standstill without having a test environment. You know, don't feel as comfortable doing a lot of testing in production. So now that the test environment is in place, we actually, our API account is set up through production and test, but we've been able to leverage the test endpoint for the transactions. There is some quirks we're seeing as part of the submission process. One specific one is related to you know, the manufacturer's license information that they enter as a prerequisite in their UDI account. It has to be entered both in the production environment as well as the test environment, and to have the licensing number identified, information about the license of the products that will be submitted. Seeing some cross-validation challenges between that information with the UDI submissions. That's one of the thing that we currently have ongoing, an open query with the NMPA to work out. But otherwise, it's you know, it's everything's there to be able to connect. You know, the API is working. It's just more of some of the details within the actual validations happening on the end of the NMPA.
Very good. I think we have a poll right now. Sonia, let's do a poll, find out what the audience is envisioning as to their submission method. So there are a couple options there of submitting data to China. Let's launch that poll.
Okay, thank you very much. Yes, I will do that right now. Audience members, there is a poll question in front of you. I'll give you 45 seconds to complete this poll. And the question is, which best describes your prep for UDI data submission to China NMPA? So please go ahead and select one, and your options are below. One option is not started, need help, planning started with only internal resources, planning started with third-party help, and the last option there is have progressed collecting UDI data. So please go ahead and cast your votes, because as you know, this is done in real time, and I'll be able to share the results with you once I close the polls. So your participation is greatly appreciated. Okay, and it looks like we have the majority of our members have done so, so thank you very much for that. I'll leave another 10 seconds for the remainder to go ahead and cast your vote, and then I will close the polls. Okay, thank you everyone for that. I am now going to close the polls and share the results. Okay, so here's the results from our last poll. Which best describes your prep for UDI data submission to China NMPA? We have 45% that said not started, 3% said need help, 26% said planning started with only internal resources, 12% planning started with third-party help, and 14% had have progress collecting UDI data. So thank you everyone for participating in that last poll. Now back to you, Gary and John.
All right, very good. Thank you for that participation. We have a little bonus topic here that I'm going to cruise through rather quickly and leave it for some homework if you're so interested in diving into some of the South Korea activities. But at a very high scan, if you look at South Korea, again, the time frame is roughly the same as what we talked about in China. They put some legislation and regulation in place. Policy is a little bit different. They do make use of GS1, but there is this interaction with the device registration database that's already in place. So if you're currently selling in South Korea, you'll have some information pre-loaded and part of that particular registration process. So there's a step one of getting that data downloaded. Some of the fields are populated from that particular database, and then you add information to that spreadsheet regarding UDI fields, and then upload that completed spreadsheet back to the web interface, and then use a database for editing. So they're kind of starting off in a manual mode. We're looking at some machine-to-machine API connections there. The other thing that's noteworthy in South Korea is that they do include the track and trace requirements. So there's some reporting, appears to be monthly. Once that gets up and rolling, that could be significant type of transactions. And again, I skipped over that first bullet, but again, there's only a production environment at this point that John had alluded to earlier. The timing is shown down below for the class 4, 3, 2s, and 1s, starting back in 2019. So we just passed the July deadline for class 3s, and then looking forward to 2021, 2022. Hopefully they will have, again, full support for the machine-to-machine at some point in time here in the near future, and that would be able to accommodate some of these higher volume devices in the class 2 area and class 1 area. We'll leave this for homework, 40 total attributes. And again, some are very similar to the FDA, but in this case, most of them are not. They're unique to South Korea. So you can take a look at that. And then John, let's close this South Korea session out. Just a quick report. What have we done at this point with the connection with South Korea?
Right, we're working through a proof of concept utilizing the API available for South Korea. You know, like you mentioned, it's just a production, so you know, working with the manufacturer to carefully utilize that to see the stability of the APIs. There is some known issues occurring where you know, records are publishing, but there's unexpected results of how it's being published into the database that we're currently in the process of you know, speaking to South Korea Health Authority about to kind of understand what the issues may be.
Very good. One thing I'd like to touch on before we get into the Q&A is a quick summary of the RETEC solution. So what we have seen, and this was illustrated again today with China and South Korea, a number of regulatory bodies around the world, and that also includes not only US, Europe, China, and so on, but then in parallel, there are customer requirements. Big example there is the National Health Service of England that are asking for data to be in UDI. Eventually, you'll see requirements for downstream users, track and trace, and other type of entities requiring data. And we have been keeping a close eye on all those three fronts and see a trend that the data collection is complex. Data sets are quite different. The business rules are not uniform, and they're very subtle. So what looks like the same field is not the same field when you get into the details. It's really tough to work through all the submission methods. There's not a uniform gateway, and there's many different points that need to be connected. So knowing all that, RETEC has put together this single source for medical device solution. And John, do you just want to touch quickly on the main functions here of how we work as basically the data hub that acts as a conduit for the medical device manufacturer and then distributes the data out to various channels?
Yeah. So essentially, as you said, we single platform where we're able to receive global UDI data spanning multiple health authorities in a standard that the single source application supports. And within the application, we're able to load, merge, aggregate that information, validate it according to the particular health authority channel business rules, and then further manage the submission process to those health authority databases. The application can be used from actual users, working through the applications and logging into the user interface and using user interface functionality. We also have the ability to serve more as a connector to manufacturers who may want to call these capabilities via APIs, still leverage everything we have here, but have more of a serving single source as an automated connector to these databases.
All right, very good for that high level. Let's throw in one poll question here, and then we'll get to the Q&A. Sonia, let's open up that poll question about the UDI submission methods.
Okay, thank you very much. Here it is. Audience members, there's your question. Which submission method is planned for NMPA? And you have a couple options below. Please only select one. Not decided, use NMPA web interface, build internal submission interface, install third-party submission interface, or engage SaaS provider with submission interface. Please go ahead and cast your votes, and then we will start off with the Q&A right after we've done this. Okay, thank you very much, everyone, for participating. Now I'm going to close the polls and share the results. Okay, so here are the results. Which submission method is planned for NMPA UDI? We have 60% not decided, 9% use NMPA web interface, 4% build internal submission interface, 13% install third-party submission interface, and 13% engage SaaS provider with submission interface. So thank you, everyone. Now back to you, Gary.
All right, very good. I just want to let you know that if you have further questions or like to talk more about some of the disadvantages of putting that method together, it looks like a lot of people are still deciding what to do. Please feel free to get a hold of us there with that email, the phone number, and go to the website. With that, Sonia, let's open up the floor and get some of those questions answered that have been coming in.
Yes, that's right. Okay, so I just wanted to say thank you very much for that very insightful presentation, first and foremost, and I hope everyone enjoyed it. Now, I would like to invite our audience to continue sending in their questions or comments right now using the questions window for the Q&A portion of the webinar. I've already received some questions, so I will start with those. Gary and John, are you ready?
Let's do it.
Okay, let's do it. What can be expected from the initial company registration for a NMPA UDI database account? Is there a lengthy wait period before you are notified as approved and given credentials?
Sure, I'll take this one, Gary. So in our experience to date, there is a setup process for the manufacturer to work with the NMPA to have their UDID account created. And the most recent occurrence of that took roughly within a week in working with the NMPA to have that account created to receive your credentials. However, those credentials will work both for the test environment as well as the production environment, but there has to be some work on the NMPA end to sync that. So it has to be clear upon that setup that that is your intent to have both environments. That just gives you the credentials, but there is some setup work I was mentioning earlier about entering in the license information. Some manufacturers, the NMPA did an initial transfer for them and provided them, migrated that information into their account, but then it has to be reviewed by the manufacturer, corrected, and maintained going forward. Doesn't appear like the NMPA is going to be supporting that, maintenance of that, and perhaps not even doing that for everyone. So we have some manufacturers we work with who did not have any of the information migrated, and need to enter it in themselves. So that's some setup work that has to be performed, which, depending on how many licenses you have, could be a day or two after getting the credentials. And now there's the onboarding as well. If utilizing an API, there's a setup for the declaration interface. Again, this is going to be a form you fill out. You have to include, depending upon the way you're connecting, have information like your social credit code that's associated with the business activity in China. But it's been pretty quick, again, within a week, having those setups approved.
Okay, thank you. Here's our next question. Is it a requirement that you have a local affiliate in China?
Yes, there would be a requirement for a local affiliate or an agent representing your organization within China. So that is a requirement there, and that should not be new just from US UDI. If you're marketing, selling your products in China, it's something that should be in place.
I have so many questions here. Okay, here's our next one. What are the main China UDI data elements that differ widely from US FDA list definitions? Can you give the top 3 to 4 examples?
I have the list in front of me here, John. I think mainly in the regulatory area are the ones that are unique to China. So things like the NMPA classification code, the medical insurance code, the product generic name. It's probably going to be in Chinese versus US and that sort of thing. So that is some of the highlights. And surprisingly, there's a lot that are similar. Very encouraged to see the reuse of a number of fields and concepts. Again, the format may change a little bit. The concept are similar to US. So the ones that are different are related to the regulatory identification of the product.
Okay, let's go to the, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I was just agreeing.
Okay, all right, let's go to the next question. I have here, okay. If you're having GS1 as issuing agency, do you then think that I am safe for all coming countries' UDI demands?
Yeah, we've seen very good acceptance to the GS1 standard. Obviously, they're a predominant player in the US and globally, certainly throughout Europe, now recognized in China. There was some questions whether or not we would see good adoption throughout Asia, but it certainly has been well adopted. Saudi Arabia also has specs for approving GS1. South Korea recognizes GS1. So, John, have you seen anything that doesn't, any country that doesn't recognize GS1?
Not to date, no. It looks like a pretty good, looks like it'd be in pretty good shape if that's the issuing agency you're using.
Yeah.
Okay,
if I was starting with a blank sheet, I think I'd use GS1 standard. In many cases, many countries require you to use GS1. So keep that in mind when you start to look at UDI.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a ton of questions, but I'm just going to try to squeeze in 2 more. Okay, here it is. Can UDI data values be submitted in English? Must text and enumerated lists be in Chinese?
John, you want to take that one?
Yeah, so the text, we've seen mixed results of the data that was submitted through the pilot. You can actually extract that information from the NMPA UDI website. So we have seen English and Chinese. So, our systems support both, but there's probably needs some additional clarification from a guideline perspective as to what they're expecting. Typically with UDI, you're always expecting what's on the label, and I would expect Chinese. enumerations and so forth, those are in Chinese as well. So all the information that the NMPA puts out, it is all coming in Chinese, including enumerations and field descriptions and so forth.
Yeah, I've only seen a few fields. One field in particular is a field that allows an English name of the registrant. So and that's the anomaly. Everything else, I believe, would be in Chinese.
Okay, let's squeeze in one last question. We have a ton of them, but unfortunately we can't get to them, but let's try this last one here. Does a comparison exist between the US and China NMPA regulatory policy requirements?
Well, we did a little bit of that comparison in the presentation today. So there was a side-by-side comparison of the FDA and how China NMPA implemented it. Obviously, that goes much deeper. I think as a result of this first batch, there may be some additional guidelines that come out, and some of the details would be start to expose, and even more so down around the direct marketing and things like that, which after this first batch, there may be more information, and a further side-by-side comparison would be available. So we keep an eye on that and would hope to present information on a webinar perhaps in the future. We'll go around when we have more information. We'll do this again and dive perhaps deeper into a comparison of the policies.
Okay, well, thank you very much for those questions. We have reached the end of the question and answer portion of the webinar. If we couldn't attend to your questions, the team at RETEC may follow up with you after this presentation. Now, if you have further questions, direct them to the email addresses on your screen. And there it is. So that's RETEC Life Sciences team. So we got meddevice@retec.com or call 1-215-682-8279, and it's www.retec.com. Thank you everyone for participating in today's webinar. You will be receiving a follow-up email from Xtalks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen. Your participation is appreciated as it will help us to improve on our further webinars. Now, I'm about to send you a link in your chat box. You'll be able to view the recording of this event at that link and also share this link with your colleagues when they register for the recording as well. So I encourage you to do that. Now, please join us in thanking our speakers, Gary Sainer, Senior Manager, Information Solutions, Life Sciences, and John Lorenc, Senior Manager, Regulatory Solutions, both with RETEC, for that very insightful presentation.